Hello, I'm Greg Holloway, and welcome to the continuation of the Common Sense Texans gubernatorial virtual debate, this time with Democratic candidate Bill White. Mayor White will be answering the same questions that were asked of the three GOP candidates. These questions were prepared by grassroots conservatives across the state. There'll be 3 questions on this YouTube. Let's start right now.
Well, first, those projects that are of regional significance for our transportation needs ought to be governed and shaped by regional organizations. So, for example, the San Antonio metropolitan area, Austin, Dallas-Fort Worth, Houston, and other major metropolitan areas throughout our state. Well, I was in Tyler the other day, and there were traffic problems in Tyler. But each local government entity, if we're dealing with how people get from where they live to where they work, we ought to decentralize that decision-making and authority to the cities and counties and regional organizations as much as possible. Why not give them grants of the funds that are available and let them decide and give them the tools to find where they can find the local funds to supplement those needed, to supplement the funds from the state accumulated by the motor fuels taxes so that they can provide for the needs of their citizens. You know, nothing makes me more irritated than people who rail on about the mandates from Washington and the centralization of power that occurs in Washington, and yet they fight very hard to retain power in Austin so that people in local regions, the counties, the cities, the school districts, the school boards, the parents who go before school boards, and the regional government entities won't have a say in what happens within their region. That's inconsistent. As governor, having the experience of being a local elected official, where I know what accountability means, where I live among my neighbors, I want to give as much power to local regions as possible. There will be those projects which are, I guess to say, interstate in nature. And for that, we need to begin phasing out the diversion of the motor fuels taxes. After all, whatever one may think of the relative merits of transportation funding versus education, mental health, and some of the other basic needs provided by state government, I will tell you this, there's something akin to fraud when you impose a tax telling the voters you're going to use it for one purpose and then you use it for another purpose. I would like to see transparent government. And in that vein, I will hope the voters of this state realize that time after time after time, the government in Austin has imposed burdens on local school districts which drive up local property taxes. They've dictated that we raise the amount that we fine people, or they impose taxes. Get this, they've imposed taxes on municipal fines that you pay for traffic violation, where the money is swept away and goes to Austin because they think that people will not figure that out. We need openness and transparency in taxation. Well, you know, the topic of privatization, I've had a lot of history. There is somebody, I haven't checked the facts, but they told me that I was involved in more privatizations at the federal level than anybody they ever knew involved in the federal government. Because when I was Deputy Secretary of Energy, I championed the privatization of some of those functions on which government didn't have a core competence. I'll give you 2 examples. We had naval petroleum reserves that were operated by the government from a time in World War I where they were predicting that we would run out of oil during World War I, so that the government had to take over some oil fields in California and Wyoming. And they remained under that control because the contractors wanted to continue to do the job. I was one of those people who engineered basically putting it up to bid, getting money for the taxpayer so that we can pay down the debt of the federal government, and putting it in more efficient hands. The same thing with the manufacture of uranium used for nuclear fuels. I championed that. Between the 2 of them, there were $7 billion of privatizations that I helped shepherd through. I will also tell you that there's cases I've seen where privatization has hurt the taxpayers because the vendors were able to get away with murder. you find in the oil and gas business, there's always a balance when oil and gas company between those things that it relies on their vendors to do, what you call oil and gas service companies, and you have your in-house employees do. What I think the key to it is this: those things that are your core competence you need to be able to do, and you need to have more expertise and more business sense within the government than the vendors do. Otherwise, you're going to get hosed by the vendors. Oh my goodness. I mean, I hope that people understand that I make mistakes every day, every week. In my faith, we're taught that none of us are perfect, and there's mistakes I made I probably don't even know about. If I did know about them, I wouldn't have made the mistake in the first place. I'm trying to think of some specific. I'll tell you one thing early on. There was a case where, and I don't know the mistake, maybe you call it naivety, but in the city of Houston, Harris County said they were going to build a new jail, and with that being said, I let go some jailers so that they could hire some jailers on their own. And if I would have known at the time that they wouldn't build a new jail, I wouldn't have done that. And I probably, if I was more experienced in government, I would have known that if somebody tells you something, how would I say it? You better take it with a grain of salt, unless you know where the source of funding is going to come from. So, that would be a mistake. I made that kind of mistake from time to time, but that's one good thing about having some experience in both the private sector and the public sector, is you have a better idea of who you can trust and when they tell you what you can count on, when you can count on it.